Texans trade for Stefon Diggs and break the internet. What does it mean? What are the pros and cons, and what the heck is next? Let's get into it in a special edition of The Locker Room.
Yeah. Yeah. It's The Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker room, yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top two and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got takes for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up,
welcome to The Locker Room, number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 Central, Sports Radio 610 in the Odyssey app. And today was a wild day, especially for a radio host like myself. This was one of those rip the rundown type of days. There was a lot to talk about around town, but at 9:56 a.m., Adam Schefter broke the news that the Texans traded for Stefon Diggs. They acquired Stefon Diggs in a 5th or 6th rounder in 2025 for a 2025 second-round pick, which essentially means that the question we've been asking for a long, long time, and the question that we've been trying to get to the bottom of is, what the hell is Nick Cirio up to? What is going on inside the mind of Nick Cirio? Why are they freeing up cap space with Titus Howard? How are they going to recover from whiffing on Keenan Allen? Are they going to get CJ Stroud more weapons? They told us with their actions, their failed actions, that they wanted to get more offensive weaponry for CJ Stroud, and they got it. And they got it in the form of Stefon Diggs. And quite frankly, they got it for a price that makes this move, which is a splash move, which can be considered understandably an aggressive move, but they got it to where it's really not that risky. It's not conservative, but it's really not that risky, which is what the crazy thing is about this Stefon Diggs trade. Let's just go back, and there's a 3-week window that I want to focus on here. There's a 3-week window that I think kind of summarizes what led the Texans to Stefon Diggs. And it's been a long time coming with Stefon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills. There's been some weird stuff going on there for a long, long time. But if you look at just the 3-week window of what the Houston Texans, the last 3 weeks, starting today, we go back to March 14th. March 14th was a day where Keenan Allen was traded to the Chicago Bears. The reports came out, and the reports surfaced that the Texans were actually involved, and the Texans actually offered a draft pick next year, a 3rd-round pick next year for Keenan Allen, but the Chargers decided to trade him to the Bears. So that was 3 weeks. That was 3 weeks ago. That was March 14th. Then we go to a few days later, or 1 day later. The Texans make a random ass trade with the Minnesota Vikings for 2 second-round picks, 1 this year, 1 next year. Trade back 19 spots. And they add another 6th round pick. And you're immediately wondering, what the hell are they doing? What is going on with this? What exactly are we doing? And Nick Cirio said this at the time when asked about that trade.
We received a few calls about that pick. We looked at the information, and D'Amico and I, and again, we talk about everything. So no decisions are made in a vacuum. So based on the discussions that we had, and then based on the discussions that we had with Minnesota, when that opportunity was presented, we felt it made sense for us. So some of this is really just about positioning pools of players or clusters of players. So probably anywhere from 25 to 40, you're going to probably have a very similar type of player are, would we have players that we feel comfortable with? Probably the answer is yes. But by the same token, if we were to move out of that, like what's the opportunity cost of moving out of that pick? Moving back 19 spots or whatever it is to the top of the second round there in the 40s. When you go back specifically to, let's call it that area, over the last few years, guys like Petrie, Maffei, Brisker, even last year, Laporta, Mayer, Bergeron, Musgrave, Branch, Jaden Reed. So I would say you look at those football players who have really made a significant impact on their football team. But if we happen to stay at 42, we're hopeful that we're going to be able to find a good football player or two that can help our football team. So when you take all the information on face value, in the end, we felt comfortable with the decision that we were making. Does it maybe potentially eliminate a certain pool of players? Potentially, but it doesn't mean we can't come. Not going to be good players available to pick. The discussions that D'Amico and I had throughout the course of the week and specific to this situation, we both felt comfortable. And so in the end, we made a decision that we felt made the most sense for us, and we'll kind of keep moving forward.
All right. So they made that decision, and it was the day after the Keenan Allen trade. So they made that decision on March 15th. March 14th, you had the Keenan Allen trade. Then you had the Vikings trade on March 15th. Then on March 29th, randomly, on a Friday morning, they restructured Titus Howard's contract. And you're wondering, okay, what in the hell is that about? You already have pretty good cap space. Why in the hell are you structuring Titus Howard's contract? What's going on here? Well, now we know. We asked the question, and now we know. The Texans acquire Stefon Diggs on April 3rd, which concludes that wild 3-week cycle in which Keenan Allen was traded on March 14th. You ran on that. The Vikings trade with the Texans draft picks on March 15th. Titus Howard restructures on March 29th. And then that brings us right here, 3 weeks, the Texans trade for Stefon Diggs. So the optimal trade ends up looking like this. And this is where you really get impressed with where the Texans are right now. You have basically the Texans trading a first rounder for a second, Diggs, a fifth rounder, and 2 sixth rounders. Let me say that again. You traded a first rounder in return for a second. So you basically had a pick swap with the final compensation. You get Stefon Diggs, you get a fifth rounder, and you get 2 sixth rounders. That is incredible. And a lot of times when you make moves like this, you have to do it at the sake of draft compensation. The Texans didn't do that, in large part because they had some extra draft compensation from the Watson trade, and also because they made that Vikings trade. So the Vikings trade makes sense. I know initially when this trade happens, you wonder, well, what's that mean for the draft? It's the exact same. You have the exact same picks now that you had before 9:56 this morning. So you have it is the exact same draft compensation that you had before. That's insane. So you still have as much to work with. You're not at the mercy of a wide receiver heavy draft. And it's not like you broke the bank for Stefon Diggs. Now, I was against initially trading for Stefon Diggs because I didn't see any way that Buffalo would trade him to the Houston Texans without wanting relatively decent value, like perhaps a little bit more than this. There's also the unhappiness in Buffalo, which some players have been critical of him for. I've seen Rob Gronkowski say that. But for me, I don't think he is going to come into this situation, he being Stefon Diggs, and be bad in this locker room. Because I think the D'Amico impact is the biggest thing. And I think this is something that it almost feels like he doesn't even get enough credit. You know, we're talking about Cirio cook him. We're talking about, CJ, all that. D'Amico makes this possible. D'Amico has, in a short time, set up a culture where if a guy's unhappy in a really good situation, where you're perhaps a field goal away from making a Super Bowl, where a couple of years ago you were 19 seconds away from making a Super Bowl, and you're unhappy and you want to go to Houston. So I think the DeMeco impact is big as well. As far as the actual risk, there is no risk, because a couple of things. First of all, you're not asking for Stefon Diggs to be the man. So there's talk about, well, he might be washed. He had 5 100-yard games the first 6 games of the season, and then he didn't have one over 90 yards after. Well, they changed offensive coordinators. They fired Ken Dorsey, and I think Joe Brady didn't look at Diggs as important as he was. So there's that. The other thing is the optimism about Tank Dell and Nico Collins. It doesn't go anywhere. But now you're not relying on 2 guys who've kind of had trouble staying healthy. Nico's missed 13 games, plus he's left some games. And Tank last year. You're not relying on those guys. You open stuff up for them, and they still have that same upside. So you're not asking Stefon Diggs to come in here and be the man. You're actually opening that up. The other thing is that you still have the same draft equity that you had before. You have a full draft. You got that extra pick from the Minnesota Vikings. You flipped that. You basically traded back to 19, and you got Stefon Diggs, and you got a 5th and 2 6ths. There's no reason to be upset with that. And as far as the talk about, Stefon Diggs being washed up and maybe not what he once was, I know there's talk about, the unhappiness and all that, and the season last year. I mean, the guy played all 17 games. He had 107 catches, 1,183 yards, and 8 touchdowns. You'll take that every time. And oh, by the way, he's probably going to have better receivers around him. So I think it's a home run because you didn't give up a ton. You have a locker room that can hold him down, and you didn't give up much, and you have draft equity. So I appreciate everyone for coming through. They got a stellar deal on Diggs. I agree with you. H and Rob, shout out to the people out in Cali. But yeah, it was an absolute steal of a deal. It's a low risk, high reward deal for a guy who's been a multi-time All-Pro. And he doesn't have to be your top dog. You're not relying heavily on Stefon Diggs. You're adding him to the mix. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. Now, what's the impact on the draft? That's the next question that naturally comes up. What's the impact on the draft? Well, you don't have to sit there and cross your fingers and say, man, how are they going to find a receiver if they want to draft a receiver? Because that was the one thing where the Texans were sitting at 22, whatever it was, 23 and 22. And you're hoping maybe that a receiver falls your way, but there's no guarantees on it. So if they were looking for a receiver and you traded back to where they traded back to, then maybe you're wondering, okay, what the hell are they going to do here? Are they going to be in no man's land? Are they going to have to settle for a receiver? What are we doing here? You don't have to do that anymore. So now you can focus on D tackle, corner, maybe best player available, given the fact that you have 3 picks on day 2. Maybe best player available. I mean, maybe they get in a situation where a tight end falls in their lap and they feel like there's like a complete tight end that they can put in there with Dalton Schultz. Maybe they like Tavondre Sweat out of Texas. That seems to be one of the most popular names right now. Maybe that happens. But as far as the impact on the draft, you can fill some holes now. You can figure it out. And you have plenty of room to wiggle around. You've made significantly impactful moves on offense. You've made significantly impactful moves on defense, and you can just kind of figure it out. If there was a glaring hole, I would say right now, perhaps corner. Perhaps. The Okudah Henderson situation, I mean, I'm not going to dismiss it, but I don't know that they want to rely on it. But we'll see. But you're not having to sit there and be at the mercy when there's this receiver run. The other thing about this that I think is interesting is you're sitting at 42 and you're at 23 before. So you're sitting at 42. And I like to use some math when it comes to draft picks. And I like to kind of look at it this way. I'm sure the Texans are still going to put together their draft board and they'll rank all the players, and they'll probably put players at positions they don't even need on their board. Maybe. But they're not going to draft a quarterback. So let's say 4 quarterbacks go before 42. That would put you at 38. Let's say that 10 receivers go. That would put you at 28 because you're probably not in the market for a receiver. Tackles, you're damn sure not going to draft. So let's say 6 tackles go. That's 22. They don't have glaring needs at a lot of these positions. So every time that a wide receiver goes in this draft at this point with Diggs, fist pump. Every time a quarterback goes, fist pump. Every time that a tackle goes, thank you. That's the luxury they have right now with where they're at. We're not sitting here crossing our fingers and hoping that, that there's some way that they can add to the offense. It's just not there. Now, there's some depth stuff they can figure out, but that's the impact on the draft right there. The impact on the draft is you're not at the mercy of this wide receiver run that's going to happen, and you don't go into a draft crossing your fingers and hoping that you can add some offensive weaponry for CJ Stroud. You've kind of moved in from that. And the draft is full still. That's the craziest thing about it. And that's the beauty of that Minnesota trade now that we look back. And we were talking about this before. By the way, it is the Locker Room, #1 source for Texans digital content. Be sure to subscribe, and ride along. I'm on Sports Radio 610, 10 to 2 Central, every single day, Monday through Friday. So the draft is still full. You have the same picks that you had before. So you're not adjusting. It didn't come at the mercy of anything. That's the beauty of that Minnesota pick. And we were talking about this. There was talk about, will the Texans trade up? Maybe you can now. Maybe you can now because you've eliminated one of your needs. Maybe now you try to get back in that first round. I think now it might make more sense because you can kind of plug and figure something out. Maybe now it makes a little bit more sense. But you're not at the and you look at the optimal results. The optimal result has been laid out. We just laid it out with the Diggs trade. So you're not combining, like, say you traded 2 2s to move up and you say, well, we'll give up a first to get 2 2s, and then we traded 2 2s. What is going on? That's kind of been eliminated by Cirio. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And I've maintained my whole thing with the Nick Caserio situation is I don't know whether this was a plan, a pivot, or both, or if I'm just getting semantic. Talked about the 3-week layout for Nick Caserio, where, 3 weeks ago, Keenan Allen gets traded for. Next day, you make the trade with the Vikings. 20-ish days later, 19, whatever, 18, you restructure Titus Howard, and then you bring in Stefon Diggs. Perhaps after they missed out on Keenan Allen, that's when they decided, okay, let's start playing some checkers for Stefon Diggs. Because the initial plan was Keenan Allen. Then you made the trade that gave you the extra pick that you ended up sending to the Bills. Then you restructured the contract. So maybe this was a pivot. And I think that's one of the more encouraging things as well, is the backup plan was just as potentially impactful and just as low risk as the initial plan. That's called a level-headed human being. Bill O'Brien wasn't a level-headed human being. When he made the DeAndre Hopkins trade, the craziest thing about that dumbass trade was that initially they wanted Carlos Hyde to be their starting running back. He said no. So your backup plan was to go trade for a third-string running back that was washed and send one of your best players to Arizona in order to do that. That's a ridiculous backup plan, isn't it? I mean, that's a little bit irrational. Nick Cirio is rational. He's good at pivoting, and regardless of it, if it's the initial plan or not, he's willing to be aggressive, and his aggressiveness is still somewhat safe. That's the fascinating thing about this whole thing. H-Town TD 2000, appreciate you, my friend. Rate 1 to 10. How much does Diggs potentially affect the locker room, positive or negative? I think the impact is going to be perhaps. I think he's going to be good in the locker room. I think he's going to fit in well. I think he's going to be happy to be here. He's going to be 3.5 hours away from his brother, who's on the Cowboys. By the way, it's kind of obvious they're going to play on Thanksgiving, and they're going to have like Diggs family gathering type of stuff. Is that like the worst kept secret possible? Is that what's going to happen? It just makes a little bit too much sense, right? I imagine them sitting behind like a Thanksgiving table, talking about like family time and all that type of stuff. They might even throw Aiden Diggs in there, the son of Stefon. But yeah, I think the impact is good. And I heard this. It's kind of crazy because I was driving to the station today, and I was listening to Seth Payne and Sean Pendergast, which you always should, 6 to 10 Central, Sports Radio 610, the Odyssey app. And I heard Seth talking about, it's good to have all these guys that were captains in college. It's good to have all these leaders, but if everyone's a leader, who the hell are they leading? In other words, like if you have a whole group of valedictorians, who the hell are they tutoring if they don't need a tutor? And that's where the culture comes into play. That's where the D'Amico Ryans impact comes into play. And that's where you're able to bring in guys like Stefon Diggs, who are excited, who are trying to fit in, who are trying to buy in. And that's the CJ Stroud impact as well. So I think that is a good point by Seth. And I think this kind of sets that. Frank says, I need like 5 jerseys. We were talking about that today because I remember 2 years ago, we did a segment where we were talking about how ass the jersey selection was. And you had like basically, I think Reeves Maben had a jersey in the team shop. Rex Burkhead had a jersey in the team shop. There was a Brandon Cooks. Like it was trash. And a jersey is kind of a financial commitment. I mean, you're dropping like at least $1 bill. I don't know how much jerseys are now. Are they like 150? Some of them are 200. But now you just look in that shop. I mean, they're going to be able to go from left all the way to right. You're going to have CJ, obviously. You're probably going to have a Mixon. You're going to have Nico's. You're going to have Tanks. You're going to have Diggs. You're going to have Stingley's. You're going to have Will Anderson's. Maybe if you want to get wild, you can have a Christian Harris. There's a lot of jerseys there, a lot of options. You're going to have the new uniform. So who knows? They might cost you close to $200 now. But that's the beauty of going through the mud the way they did. Mr. Mack says he's going to get him a 7 jersey. It's probably a safe bet, I would say. I'm just imagining that what the wide receiver core looks like whenever Diggs is walking out there with him. Because you go to training camp, you see the wide receivers come out. Tank, Nico, that's cool. You got Schultz, you got CJ. Diggs just adds a new element, right? I mean, some of y'all probably go to training camp. If you're out there, come by, say hi. We broadcast on the sidelines. but when you just Diggs walking out with this squad just adds like a kind of a different element there. So I think that is that's something that is exciting for a lot of people, the extra stuff. Where does the Texans receiving core rank in the NFL? 1 to 3. Because there's still a lot of question marks if we're going 4 to 6 on this receiving core. But if we're ranking the top receiving cores in the NFL, I think we got to put Miami in the conversation. Miami with obviously with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and then whoever the hell they decide to throw at 3. They were talking about Odell Beckham Jr. I think they made him an offer, but whatever. Miami is up at the top. Cincinnati, assuming that Higgins stays, which might be a big assumption, even without Tyler Boyd, I think when you have Jamar Chase and Higgins, you got to put them in the discussion. The Jets have Garrett Wilson, and they just added Mike Williams. I don't know if you think they're in the discussion or not. Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. How good is Brandon Cooks right now? They just lost Michael Gallup. Maybe not in the discussion. Philadelphia is definitely up there with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. So you got to put them up there. Minnesota with Jefferson and Addison and whatever they figure out, because I think Addison's gonna continue to improve. Now, who's going to throw to him is another issue on itself. But just wide receiver, I think you can put Minnesota in the discussion. The Rams, they got Puka and they got Cooper Kupp. We can put them in the discussion. Seattle, Metcalf, Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, definitely in the discussion. So there's a handful of teams that could be in the discussion. Where would you rank the Texans 1 to 3? I think there's question marks about Tank and there's question marks about Nico, but if one of these guys that we've just mentioned, even Diggs potentially, if one of these guys is going to be your third most productive, I think you got to put Texans in the top 5 for sure, right? You got to put them up there. I don't think there's any doubt about it. So top 5 maybe? Don't know. But there's a lot of squads that are at least in the discussion. So I would say probably 4. I'd say 4 out of 5 for sure. That's where I put, because I think their potential third. Some wide receiver 2s are so good that like the combos that it doesn't matter who they put at 3. But the Texans, just from 1 to 3, I think that's pretty. That's a pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive group, no doubt, 100%. What is Nick Cirio up to now? This is something else I want to get to. This is another thing that I find interesting, and I think once I present this, it might kind of excite you for what the hell they got planned, because we've kind of touched on this before, but there's been some context clues with Nick Caserio. Vincent Mark says, I forgot about Tennessee. No, I didn't. Are you kidding? I didn't forget about Tennessee. Are you kidding? The hell are they? What are DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley? Come on, brother. Treylon Burks? No, I didn't forget that. Promise you that. That damn sure didn't forget that. Speaking of which, y'all are going to like this. And y'all are going to have some fun with this because I'm going to open up the lines. The clip that went viral on Texans Twitter of the Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud, the Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud comparison. The guys who said it, and my guy Morocco T, he's one of the more hilarious Titans fans. I'm gonna have all 3 of those dudes on a week from today. All 3. So y'all can get cracks at them. They want all the smoke. Shout out to Morocco Taylor, Leonard Firestone. and RJ Ellison. All three of them are going to come through. So you're going to get to talk to these dudes. And we'll have some fun with them about the Titans stuff. But what is Nick Cirio up to now? That's a question I have. And the reason I asked the question is this. So we saw the Vikings move, which kind of made you raise the eyebrows. And then we saw the clearing of cap space, and we wondered, okay, what's popping here? Like, what is the deal? And now we know that the Stefon Diggs thing went down. Now, here's the thing that I find interesting about that timeline and an extra element to the process that went down. I think that they are feeling so good about day 2 of this draft. I think they are feeling so good about day 2 of this draft that they're only willing to give up picks next year. Because if you remember, the Keenan Allen trade was they offered a 3rd-round pick next year. The Stefon Diggs trade, they offered a 2nd-round pick next year. So for whatever reason, despite the fact they have 2 2nd-round picks, the Texans do not want to give up picks this year. So when they traded back, and Nick Cirio told you, and we heard it earlier on in this show, when they traded back, Nick Cirio, he essentially told you that he liked this day 2 of the draft. And if you look at the offers that have been made and the trade that's been executed, he's backing it up. TC77590, shout out chat. What does that mean, sir? Shout yo chat. What does that mean? Help me out there, brother. But yeah, I think Nick Cirio is up to something on day 2. No doubt. I think he's definitely up to something. And I think they really like this day 2 layout. The optimal trade for the Texans ends up being Diggs for a first, they trade a first for a 2nd, Diggs, 5th rounder, and 2 6th rounders. Got to figure that out. What is the salary cap looking right now? It's just sway. It's looking fine. I mean, they're not in any salary cap hell. They cleared up a lot of space. They had plenty of equity to begin with. Boots Omega, sophomore slump, write it down. I guess he's talking about CJ Stroud. Crossingham says 11 mil or so. Sophomore slump for CJ Stroud. How you combat a sophomore slump is you continue to put stuff around him. And that's what the Texans have done. The reason that quarterbacks often go on sophomore slumps is you assume that the best is ahead. And you expect them to save all butts. But the Texans didn't do that. They added the offensive weaponry for CJ Stroud, and I don't even think they're done yet. So that's how you do it. If you're the Texans, that's how you avoid the sophomore slump. And I mean, could CJ Stroud, could there be some growing pains in year 2? Potentially. But that's how you do it. Someone just brought up Jalen Petrie. By the way, I see y'all talking some smack about Titans fans. Again, next week, Titans Coliseum podcast joining. We'll open up the lines. So be sure to come through here. I just saw someone mention Jalen Petrie. And I'm watching something else that's going on in town. The revival of Jeremy Pena. After an excellent rookie season where he was the ALCS and World Series MVP, kind of came down to earth last year, took a step back, sophomore slump, and now in year 3, he seems to have figured it out. What if Jalen Petrie does that too? What if Jalen Petrie's kind of the Jeremy Pena? That promising rookie season, Very disappointing year 2. What if Jalen Petrie, and I haven't dismissed Jalen Petrie, but I think it would be disingenuous, disingenuous, and you would have no credibility to at least not admit that he was bad last year. He wasn't good at all. But what if on top of everything that we're talking about, what if Jalen Petrie ends up being closer to what they thought he was going to be? What we thought he was going to be. All right, I think we're good now. She can come back or not. The baby was there. Are we good now? Check. The mic kind of dropped. We got sound now. All right, we're good. So we're good to go. But yeah, I think that Nick Caserio is up to something, no doubt. Appreciate everyone for rolling through. All right, we'll bring the baby back. Here, she's a little bit of a show killer. I've been known to do that too. Is that funny? Is that funny? You killing the show? What do you think of the Diggs trade? What do you think of the Diggs trade? You think it was a good trade? You have opinions? She's excited for sure. But yeah, I think there is a plan, no doubt. By the way, there's going to be a gathering on draft weekend. Probably a little bit of a collaboration with Cody Stutes and Figgy. We're going to you like that? We're going to have a gathering downtown somewhere. There's no day 1, so we'll be live streaming day 1. We'll live stream day 2 since it's so big. And then day 3, we'll each do our wrap-ups. We might try to broadcast live, but we're going to figure out a place to meet up if y'all want to come through and figure that out and join us. It's going to be me, Cody, and Figgy as well. If y'all have any other questions, get them in right now. We'll let her answer them if she wants to. She has Texans gear for sure. No doubt. But yeah, we'll give you the spot and we'll get that going. Anthony brings up a good point. He says Stefon Diggs is a diva. You're a diva too. But you're not relying on him, and it's a fresh start, fresh situation. Low risk, high reward. When is the press conference for Diggs? I don't know. I'm assuming he's going to get one. I actually do wonder if Stefon Diggs is going to talk some crap about Buffalo. I could see Stefon Diggs doing that. But I do think he's going to get a press conference. The weird thing was the last time the Texans had a press conference, it was Mixon and it was Daniil Hunter. And they actually kind of sent that a little bit late. So I don't know what the situation will be for Diggs. I'm assuming he's going to be pretty entertaining. I'm assuming that it's going to be pretty elite with Stefon Diggs. He'll have a lot to say. He also likes to get on Instagram. He likes to get on Twitter. He likes to talk crap. I saw he responded to a fan that said that Josh Allen didn't depend on him. Something like, "You're sure." What do I think about Tavondre Sweat? I like Tavondre Sweat. I think he's more than just a 2-down guy. I love Tavondre Sweat. Do you like Tavondre Sweat, Chubby? Do you like Tavondre Sweat? Love you. Do you know if the Bills paid for some of the salary? Now they took on the salary. They have like some dead cap, but the Texans are taking on a large chunk of it. Appreciate everyone for coming through. This is the Locker Room. Get ready for the gathering. Get ready for Sports Radio 610 tomorrow. Also got a video dropping in the morning. I'll get up and lay that out. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the Locker Room. Texas Talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize every time. Can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got takes for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways. If it's up, then it's up, we number one. You don't need to try your luck.